Eleanor Thompson sat in the small waiting room of Dr. Miller's office. The walls were light blue, and old magazines were spread on the table in front of her. She was 72 years old, with gray hair tied in a neat bun. Her hands showed age spots and her fingers were slightly bent from arthritis. She had been coming to this same doctor for over 20 years. "Mrs. Thompson," called the nurse, a young woman with a kind smile. "The doctor will see you now." Eleanor picked up her worn leather purse and followed the nurse down the hallway. She walked slowly, her knees giving her trouble today. The nurse led her to exam room number 3, took her blood pressure, and told her the doctor would be in soon. Eleanor had come in for her regular checkup. She had been feeling more tired than usual lately. Her back hurt sometimes, and she had gained a little weight. Nothing serious, she thought. Just normal things that happen when you get old. Dr. Miller came in after a few minutes. He was a tall man with glasses and graying hair at the temples. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said with a smile. "How are you feeling today?" "Just a bit tired, doctor," she replied. "And my clothes seem tighter these days." Dr. Miller nodded and asked her many questions. He checked her heart and lungs with his stethoscope. Then he asked her to lie down so he could press on her stomach. His face changed when he felt her abdomen. He pressed again, more gently this time. "Eleanor," he said slowly, "when was your last period?" She laughed a little. "Doctor, I went through menopause over 20 years ago." Dr. Miller didn't laugh. He looked serious. "I'd like to run some tests," he said. "Can you give a urine sample and some blood today?" Eleanor agreed, though she didn't understand why. The nurse came back and took her to give the samples. After that, Eleanor waited in the exam room again. She could hear Dr. Miller talking quietly to someone in the hallway. When he returned, another doctor was with him. This second doctor was a woman with short black hair. "Eleanor," said Dr. Miller, "this is Dr. Chen. She's a specialist." "It's nice to meet you," said Eleanor, feeling confused. "What kind of specialist?" "I'm an OB/GYN, said Dr. Chen. "I work with pregnant women." Eleanor stared at them. "Why do I need to see a doctor for pregnant women? I'm 72 years old." Dr. Miller sat down in the chair next to Eleanor. "Eleanor, your test results show something very unusual. You're pregnant." Eleanor thought she had misheard him. "That's impossible," she said. Dr. Chen stepped forward. "It's extremely rare, but not impossible. About 30 years ago, you had fertility treatments, correct?" Eleanor nodded slowly. She and Frank had tried to have children when they were younger. They had gone through treatments, but nothing worked. They had given up after 5 years of trying. Sometimes, Dr. Chen explained, those treatments can have unusual delayed effects. Combined with a rare hormonal change in your body, it created this situation. Eleanor put her hand on her slightly rounded stomach. "I'm pregnant. At 72? "Yes," said Dr. Miller. "It's a medical miracle. One for the history books." Eleanor's mind raced. What would Frank say? Her husband was 78 years old. They had been married for 45 years. They had built a quiet life together, just the two of them. They had never expected this. "I need to tell Frank," she whispered. The drive home was the longest of Eleanor's life. Her hands shook on the steering wheel as she practiced what she would say. How does a 72-year-old woman tell her 78-year-old husband that they're going to have a baby? As she pulled into their driveway, she saw Frank in the garden. He was cutting roses from their bushes. He loved those roses. He turned and waved at her, smiling. Eleanor took a deep breath. Her life was about to change forever. Eleanor walked slowly up the path to their small brick home. Frank was still cutting roses, his favorite hobby since retiring 10 years ago. He wore an old straw hat to keep the sun off his face and gardening gloves that were worn at the fingertips. "Hello, dear," Frank called out. His voice was still strong despite his 78 years. "How was your doctor's appointment? Everything okay with your arthritis?" Eleanor clutched her purse tightly. "Frank," she said, "we need to talk inside." Frank's smile faded. He put down his garden scissors and removed his gloves. "Is something wrong? Are you sick?" Eleanor shook her head. "Let's just go inside." They walked into their home together. The living room was neat and tidy, with pictures of their travels on the walls. They had been to many places since Frank retired from his job as an engineer. "Sit down, Frank," Eleanor said, pointing to his favorite armchair. Frank sat down slowly, his knees cracking. You're scaring me, Ellie. What did the doctor say? Eleanor took a deep breath. How could she tell him? They had tried to have children when they were young. After many years of disappointment, they had accepted their life as just the two of them. Now, at their age, everything was about to change. Frank, she began, something very strange has happened. She paused. The doctor did some tests today, and I'm pregnant. Frank stared at her. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He looked like he hadn't heard her correctly. What did you say? He asked finally. I'm pregnant, Eleanor repeated. The doctor says it's because of those fertility treatments we had years ago. Something about them stayed in my body, and now, with some rare hormone changes. Her voice trailed off. Frank stood up slowly. His face was blank, and Eleanor couldn't tell what he was thinking. Was he angry? Upset? Scared? Frank, she said quietly, please say something. Frank walked to the window and looked out at his rose garden. His back was to Eleanor, and she could see his shoulders shaking. Was he crying? Eleanor felt tears in her own eyes. This was too much for him. Too much for both of them. Frank, I know this is a shock. It's impossible, really. At our age. Frank turned around suddenly. Tears were running down his wrinkled cheeks, but he was smiling. It was the biggest smile Eleanor had seen on his face in years. A baby? He whispered. We're going to have a baby? Eleanor nodded, confused by his reaction. Yes, but Frank, we're so old. I'm 72, you're 78. How can we raise a child? Frank came to her and took her hands in his. His eyes were bright with tears and something else. Joy. Eleanor Thompson, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. This is the greatest gift we could ever receive. Eleanor stared at him in shock. But you never said you wanted children. After we stopped trying, you never mentioned it again. Frank looked down. I didn't want to make you sad. I knew how much it hurt you when we couldn't have a baby. But I've always wanted to be a father. He walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a photo album Eleanor had never seen before. He opened it and showed her the pages. There were pictures of children's bedrooms from magazines, toys circled in catalogs, and even names written in Frank's neat handwriting. I've kept this hidden for 40 years, Frank said. I've secretly wished for this our entire marriage, but I never wanted to burden you with my desire for fatherhood. Eleanor couldn't believe what she was hearing. In 45 years of marriage, she had never known this about her husband. You really want this baby? She asked. Frank nodded and pulled her into a gentle hug. More than anything in the world, he whispered. Eleanor felt something shift inside her. If Frank wanted this baby so much, maybe they could do this impossible thing together. Then I guess, she said with a small smile, we're going to be parents. 1 week after the shocking news, Eleanor and Frank sat in a large meeting room at the university hospital. 6 doctors sat across from them at a long table. Dr. Chen was there, along with specialists in high-risk pregnancy, geriatric medicine, cardiology, pediatrics, and genetics. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, said Dr. Chen, thank you for coming today. As you know, your case is extremely unusual. Frank held Eleanor's hand tightly. We understand, he said. Eleanor is the oldest pregnant woman in medical history. The head doctor, Dr. Wilson, nodded. Yes, by many years. The previous record was a woman of 66 years. You're 72, Mrs. Thompson. Eleanor felt like she was in a dream. Just 2 weeks ago, she thought her biggest health concern was her arthritis. Now she was sitting in a room full of doctors who wanted to study her. We would like to offer you the best care possible, said Dr. Wilson. But we also want to document your case for medical science. With your permission, of course. Frank sat up straighter. What exactly would that involve? The doctors explained their plan. Eleanor would need to come to the hospital twice a week for checkups. They would monitor her heart, blood pressure, and the baby's development. They would take blood samples to study how her body was supporting the pregnancy. They also wanted to film interviews with Eleanor and Frank about their experience. It's a lot to ask, said Dr. Chen gently. But your case could help us understand more about human reproduction and aging. Eleanor looked at Frank. She was scared. What if something went wrong? What if her body couldn't handle the stress? Frank seemed to read her thoughts. He turned to the doctors with a serious face. We are willing to help science, but Eleanor's health comes first. The baby's health comes first. We are not just interesting medical cases. We are people. Dr. Wilson nodded respectfully. Of course, Mr. Thompson. That's our priority, too. Eleanor was surprised by Frank's strong voice. He had always been quiet and agreeable. Now he was standing up to a room full of doctors. After the meeting, they were taken to a special examination room. Dr. Chen performed an ultrasound to check on the baby. The room was dark except for the screen showing black and white images. There, said Dr. Chen, pointing to a small shape on the screen. That's your baby. Eleanor couldn't speak. On the screen was a tiny person, moving inside her. At 72 years old, she was watching her baby's heart beat. Frank stared at the screen, tears running down his wrinkled face. Our baby, he whispered. Dr. Chen checked some measurements on the screen. Everything looks normal, she said. The baby is developing well. After the ultrasound, the doctors wanted to do more tests on Eleanor. Frank stayed by her side through all of them. He asked smart questions and wrote down everything the doctors said in a small notebook. You don't have to stay for all of this, Eleanor told him during a break. It must be boring for you. Frank looked surprised. I wouldn't be anywhere else, he said. I've waited my whole life to be a father. I want to know everything about our baby. Later that evening, as they drove home, Eleanor was quiet. She was thinking about all the risks the doctors had mentioned. Her age made everything dangerous, for her and for the baby. Are you worried? Frank asked, seeming to read her mind again. Yes, Eleanor admitted. The doctors said so many things could go wrong. Frank reached over and held her hand. The doctors also said you are surprisingly healthy for your age, and that the baby looks perfect. Eleanor smiled a little. You paid close attention. I've been preparing for this my whole life, Frank said. I won't let anything happen to you or our baby. As they pulled into their driveway, Eleanor realized something had changed. Frank, her quiet, predictable husband of 45 years, was showing a side of himself she had never seen before. It was like the news of the baby had awakened something in him. And that, perhaps, was the biggest surprise of all. Eleanor was washing dishes when she heard Frank call from the living room. Eleanor, come quickly. She dried her hands and hurried as fast as her 72-year-old legs would carry her. Frank was standing by the window, looking outside with a worried face. What is it? She asked. Look, he said, pointing. Eleanor peered through the curtains. 3 vans were parked on their quiet street. People with cameras and microphones stood on the sidewalk in front of their house. A woman was speaking into a camera, pointing at their home. Who are they? Eleanor asked. News reporters, Frank said. Someone at the hospital must have told them about us. The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Then it rang again and again. Don't answer it, Frank said. He closed the curtains. They want to turn us into a circus show. The phone started ringing too. When Frank answered it, it was a talk show host from New York asking for an interview. After that, more calls came from magazines, newspapers, and TV shows from all over the country. How did this happen? Eleanor asked, sitting down heavily on the couch. Her hand went to her stomach, which was just starting to show a small bump. Dr. Chen called, Frank said, hanging up the phone again. She says someone leaked the information, our names and address too. She's very sorry. By evening, there were 5 more news vans outside. Reporters knocked on their door every few minutes. The phone rang so much that Frank unplugged it. We can't stay here, Eleanor said. I can't handle this stress. It's not good for the baby. Frank nodded. He looked tired, but there was determination in his eyes. I'll handle this, he said. The next morning, Frank put on his best suit, the one he wore to their nephew's wedding last year. He combed his thin white hair neatly and put on his glasses. What are you doing? Eleanor asked. I'm going to talk to them, Frank said. Just once. Then they need to leave us alone. Eleanor was worried. Frank had always been shy around strangers. He didn't like being the center of attention. Are you sure? Frank kissed her forehead. Trust me. Eleanor watched from the window as Frank walked outside. The reporters rushed toward him, shouting questions all at once. Cameras flashed. Frank raised his hands, and to Eleanor's surprise, the crowd quieted down. Frank spoke for about 10 minutes. Eleanor couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see his face was calm and serious. The reporters listened without interrupting. Some of them nodded. A few took notes. When Frank finished speaking, he turned and walked back to the house without answering any more questions. The reporters didn't follow him. "What did you say to them?" Eleanor asked when he came inside. "I told them our story," Frank said. "I explained that this pregnancy is a private miracle for us, not a sideshow. I said we would give one interview to share our experience, but only if they respect our privacy now." Eleanor stared at her husband in amazement. "And they agreed?" "Most of them," Frank said with a small smile. "I also mentioned that my cousin's son is a lawyer who specializes in harassment cases." That afternoon, a famous TV host called. She offered to interview Frank and Eleanor in their home, with strict rules about privacy afterward. The interview would be shown on national television, but it would be done with respect and dignity. "Should we do it?" Eleanor asked. Frank nodded. "If we tell our story our way, maybe people will understand. And then they'll leave us in peace." Eleanor looked at this man she had been married to for 45 years. She thought she had known everything about him. His favorite foods, his habits, the way he folded his socks. But now, facing the biggest challenge of their lives, Frank was revealing a strength and wisdom she had never seen before. "When did you become so good at handling difficult situations?" she asked. Frank smiled and took her hand. "I've always been able to. There just wasn't a need for it until now." Eleanor realized there was still so much to learn about the man she loved. 2 months had passed since the news about Eleanor's pregnancy became public. After the TV interview, most reporters left them alone, just as Frank had arranged. Life became quieter, and Eleanor was now 5 months pregnant. One morning, Eleanor woke up and found Frank's side of the bed empty. This was unusual. Frank normally slept late, especially since retiring. Eleanor put on her robe and slippers and walked slowly through their small house. She heard noises coming from the spare bedroom. The door was half open. She peeked inside and was shocked at what she saw. The spare bedroom, which had been full of old boxes and unused furniture, was now almost empty. Frank was on his knees, painting the walls a soft yellow color. There were shopping bags on the floor filled with baby items. "Frank," Eleanor said. "What are you doing?" Frank turned around, surprised. Paint spotted his old t-shirt. "I wanted this to be a surprise," he said. "I'm making a nursery for the baby." Eleanor looked around the room. "When did you clear everything out?" "I've been working on it while you take your afternoon naps," Frank explained. "Our nephew Michael helped me move the heavy things." Eleanor stepped into the room. Frank had done more than just clear it out. The floors had been cleaned. New curtains hung at the windows. In the corner was a beautiful wooden crib. "Where did that come from?" Eleanor asked, touching the crib's smooth rail. Frank smiled proudly. "I made it." "You made it? How? When?" "I used to work with wood as a hobby, remember? Before my arthritis got bad, I've been working on this in Michael's garage for weeks." Eleanor was amazed. The crib was beautiful, with delicate carvings of flowers and leaves. "There's more," Frank said. He looked excited, like a little boy with a secret. "Look in the closet." Eleanor opened the closet door. Inside were tiny baby clothes, diapers, blankets, and toys, all neatly organized. "Frank, this must have cost a fortune," Eleanor said. "I've been saving for this my whole life," Frank replied, his eyes shone with happiness. "I want everything to be perfect for our baby." Eleanor sat down on a new rocking chair that Frank had placed by the window. She felt overwhelmed. "I don't understand. You never told me how much you wanted a child. All these years." Frank sat on the floor near her feet. "There's something else I need to show you," he said. He left the room and came back carrying a large box. "What's this?" Eleanor asked. Frank opened the box and took out a leather-bound book, then another and another. There were 12 books in all. "These are my journals," Frank said. "I've been writing them for our child since we first got married." Eleanor took one of the books and opened it. Inside, written in Frank's neat handwriting, were letters, advice, and stories, all addressed to a child that hadn't existed until now. "Dear child," she read aloud, "today I turned 50. Your mother and I went to the beach to celebrate. I wish you could have seen the sunset. Someday I will take you there and show you how the sun turns the water to gold." Eleanor looked up at Frank with tears in her eyes. "You wrote this 28 years ago." Frank nodded. "I've been writing to our child for decades. Even when I knew it might never happen, I couldn't stop hoping." Eleanor flipped through more pages. There were life lessons, funny stories, and even drawings. "I wanted our child to know me," Frank explained. In case I'm not around for very long after they're born." Eleanor understood then. Frank was 78. Even if everything went well, he might not see their child grow up. "These journals," Frank continued, "are my legacy. My way of being a father even if I can't be here." Eleanor reached out and took Frank's hand. This quiet man she had lived with for 45 years had been carrying these deep feelings all along. A lifetime of love for a child that was only now growing inside her. "You are going to be an amazing father," Eleanor whispered. Frank smiled. "We don't have much time, but I've been preparing for this my entire life." The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of machines. Eleanor lay in bed, her white hair spread on the pillow. At 72 years and 8 months old, she was about to give birth. "Are you comfortable?" Frank asked, holding her hand. His face showed worry and excitement at the same time. Eleanor nodded. She was tired. The last few months had been difficult. Her body struggled with the pregnancy. The doctors had watched her closely. Now, they had decided it was time for the baby to be born by C-section. Dr. Chen came into the room with 5 other doctors and nurses. "It's time, Mrs. Thompson," she said gently. "Are you ready?" Eleanor looked at Frank. He squeezed her hand. "I'll be right there with you," he promised. The medical team wheeled Eleanor's bed to the operating room. Everything was bright and clean. Machines beeped. People in green scrubs moved around, preparing things. Frank put on a special gown, mask, and cap so he could stay with Eleanor. He sat near her head and held her hand while the doctors put up a screen across her middle so she couldn't see the operation. "You'll feel some pressure, but no pain," Dr. Chen explained as they gave Eleanor medicine to numb her lower body. Eleanor was scared. She was too old for this. What if something went wrong? What if the baby wasn't healthy? What if she didn't survive? She looked at Frank. His eyes above his mask were calm and sure. He had been her rock through all of this. Always positive, always believing everything would be okay. "Tell me again about the name," Eleanor whispered, needing to hear his voice. Frank smiled behind his mask. "If it's a girl, Miracle Rose Thompson. If it's a boy, Miracle James Thompson." "Miracle," Eleanor repeated. That's what this baby was, a true miracle. The doctors worked quietly. Eleanor felt tugging and pressure, but no pain. Frank kept talking to her about the nursery, about the future, about anything to keep her mind busy. Then, suddenly, a cry filled the room. A tiny, angry cry that seemed impossible. "It's a girl," Dr. Chen announced. "A healthy baby girl." The nurses quickly took the baby to a special table. Eleanor tried to see what was happening, but couldn't from where she was lying. "Is she okay?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. "She's perfect," Dr. Chen said. 5 pounds, 7 ounces. All fingers and toes accounted for. A nurse wrapped the baby in a pink blanket and brought her to Frank. He took the tiny bundle in his arms. Eleanor had never seen such a look on his face before. Pure love and wonder. "Hello, Miracle," Frank whispered to the baby. His hands, wrinkled with age, looked enormous holding the tiny baby. Tears ran down his cheeks into his mask. Then, to Eleanor's surprise, Frank began to sing. It was a soft, sweet lullaby that Eleanor had never heard before. His voice was beautiful. Another shock. In 45 years of marriage, she had never heard Frank sing. "Where did you learn that song?" Eleanor asked when he finished. Frank looked up, almost surprised to see her there. "My grandmother sang it to me," he said. "I've always remembered it." The nurse came to take the baby for some tests and to finish caring for Eleanor. Before leaving, Frank kissed Eleanor's forehead. "I'll go with Miracle," he said. "I won't let her out of my sight." Later, in the recovery room, Eleanor watched Frank hold their daughter. He knew exactly how to support her head, how to change her diaper, how to swaddle her in her blanket. "How do you know how to do all that?" Eleanor asked. Frank looked up. I used to volunteer at the Children's Hospital every Tuesday for 20 years, he said. I never told you because I didn't want to stir up any sadness about us not having children. Eleanor stared at him. 20 years of Tuesdays, and she had never known. What else had this quiet man kept hidden in his heart? You're full of surprises, Frank Thompson, she said. Frank smiled down at their miracle baby. I had to be ready, he said simply, just in case. 3 months had passed since Miracle Rose came into the world. The small house that had been quiet for so many years was now filled with baby sounds, cries, coos, and Eleanor's soft voice singing lullabies. Eleanor sat in the rocking chair, feeding Miracle her bottle. Her arms ached from holding the baby. At 73 years old, Eleanor's body was tired in ways she had never experienced before. Let me take her, Frank said, coming into the nursery. He was moving slowly today. His arthritis was bothering him more than usual. Your hands are hurting, Eleanor said. You should rest. Frank shook his head. I rested for 78 years. Now I'm a father. He took Miracle gently and continued feeding her. The baby looked up at him with big eyes. She had Eleanor's blue eyes and Frank's nose. Taking care of a baby was hard for the elderly couple. They woke up many times each night. Their backs hurt from bending over the crib. They got tired faster than younger parents. But they also had something younger parents often didn't have: patience. They didn't mind sitting for hours just watching Miracle sleep. They weren't in a hurry to get back to work or go out with friends. We're doing okay, aren't we? Eleanor asked one evening as they sat on the couch. Miracle was asleep between them, tiny and perfect. Better than okay, Frank said. He looked tired but happy. Their family had been shocked when they first heard about the pregnancy. Eleanor's sister thought they were joking. Frank's brother was worried about their health, but now, seeing how they cared for Miracle, the family was supportive. Their neighbor Mrs. Wilson, who was 68, came over often to help. She had raised 5 children of her own. Sometimes she watched Miracle so Eleanor and Frank could take a nap. One afternoon, while Eleanor was resting, Frank took her hand. There's something I need to show you, he said. He helped her up and led her to his small office. On his desk was a stack of papers. What's this? Eleanor asked. I've set up a trust fund for Miracle, Frank explained. All our savings, our house, everything will go to her. Eleanor looked through the papers. It was more than just a trust fund. Frank had arranged everything, who would take care of Miracle if something happened to them, money for her education, even letters to be given to her on important birthdays. When did you do all this? Eleanor asked. I started the day we found out you were pregnant, Frank said. I've been working with a lawyer. I wanted to make sure Miracle would be taken care of after we're gone. Eleanor understood. It was something they both thought about but rarely mentioned. They would not live to see Miracle graduate from college or get married. Their time with her would be short. I've also arranged godparents, Frank continued. Michael and his wife have agreed. They're young, only in their 40s. They can be there for the things we'll miss. Eleanor looked at her husband with new respect. While she had been worried about diapers and feeding schedules, Frank had been planning for Miracle's entire future. You've thought of everything, she said. Frank nodded. I promised you I would take care of both of you. I intend to keep that promise, even when I'm not here anymore. That night, as they lay in bed with Miracle in her crib nearby, Eleanor thought about all she had learned about Frank in the past year. His secret desire to be a father, his hidden talents, his careful planning and quiet strength. Frank, she whispered in the dark, why did you keep so many parts of yourself secret all these years? Frank was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought he had fallen asleep. Finally, he answered. I never needed to be more than I was, he said simply. Until now, until Miracle needed me to be more. Eleanor reached for his hand in the darkness. After 45 years of marriage, she was still getting to know the man she had married. And now, they had a whole new chapter to write together, however short it might be. The small backyard was decorated with pink balloons and streamers. A banner hung between 2 trees reading Happy First Birthday, Miracle. Friends and family gathered around a table where a small cake sat with 1 candle. Eleanor watched from her chair as Frank carried Miracle among the guests. Their daughter wore a pretty pink dress and tiny white shoes. Her dark hair was tied with a ribbon. She looked at everything with curious eyes. She looks just like you, Eleanor, said Eleanor's sister, Jane. But she has Frank's smile, Eleanor replied, and his curiosity. At 74 and 79, Eleanor and Frank were now the oldest parents of a 1-year-old in the world. The past year had been the hardest and most wonderful of their lives. Time for cake, called Michael, their nephew and Miracle's godfather. Everyone gathered around as Frank placed Miracle in her high chair. Eleanor watched her husband as he helped their daughter touch the candle flame from a safe distance. Frank's hands were more twisted with arthritis now, and he moved slower than a year ago. The stress and lack of sleep had taken a toll on both of them, but the joy in his eyes when he looked at Miracle made everything worth it. After the cake, Frank stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The guests quieted down. "Thank you all for coming today," he said. His voice was strong and clear. "This past year has been a miracle, just like our daughter's name. Eleanor and I have learned so much." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. "Eleanor, this is for you." Surprised, Eleanor opened the gift. Inside was a small book with a beautiful cover. The title read, "Our Miracle, A Father's Journey." "What is this?" she asked. Frank smiled. "It's being published next month. I've been writing it since Miracle was born." A murmur went through the guests. Eleanor opened the book with shaking hands. It was the story of their journey, from the shocking news of her pregnancy to the present day. "A publisher in New York contacted me after seeing our interview," Frank explained to everyone. "They wanted our story. At first, I said no. But then I realized our story isn't just about us. It's about never giving up hope. It's about how life can surprise you, even when you think all your surprises are behind you." Eleanor looked up at her husband in amazement. "You wrote a book? When did you find time between diaper changes and midnight feedings?" Frank laughed. "I wrote while you and Miracle napped, just a little each day." He turned back to their guests. "The book will be published in 14 countries. The money will go into Miracle's college fund." Everyone applauded. Frank raised his hand for quiet again. "Our story isn't just about defying medical odds," he continued. "It's about how it's never too late to reveal your true desires, to become who you've always wanted to be, and to leave behind a legacy of love." He looked at Miracle, who was happily smashing cake into her hair. "We may not be here to see her grow up completely, but she will know us. Through my journals, through this book, and through all of you who will tell her about us." Eleanor felt tears in her eyes. The quiet, reserved man she had married had transformed into someone she was still getting to know, a devoted father, a writer, a man with depths she had never imagined. Later, after the guests had left and Miracle was asleep in her crib, Eleanor and Frank sat on the porch swing. "You keep surprising me, Frank Thompson," Eleanor said, holding the book in her hands. Frank smiled and took her hand. "Life keeps surprising us both," he said. "Who would have thought, at our age, we would start our greatest adventure?" Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't know how many more years they would have together, or with Miracle, but whatever time they had, it would be enough. They had been given a miracle, and they had discovered each other anew. As the sun set, they rocked gently, two elderly parents planning tomorrow's adventures with their miracle child.